Michael Gornick on the Fisch Bowl. Welcome.
I'm glad to be back in the bowl. Thank you, Sam.
Yes, thank you for taking the time to swim with me.
Always good to be with you.
Now, we just reconnected at Living Dead Weekend, 40th anniversary of Dawn of the Dead. Um,
Hmm.
what a spectacular event. Um, I was only able to make it for the last day because it was my mom's 60th birthday party that weekend.
Oh
Um,
my goodness! Congratulations to her. 60 years.
yeah. It was a great time. I got to see my mom in a whole nother light that I've never seen her in. Um, and it
you
was
should have brought you should have brought Mom out to the convention. Says he was 20 years old when we made the film because we had our
yeah,
40th, as you understand. Yeah.
right. And she's from Pittsburgh, so she remembers,
The filming
the
and
filming
yeah,
and one of her teachers, I think, was in the movie.
great.
I forget the person's name, but they had a part. I think they got done up as a zombie,
Excellent.
and it was like a huge event because I'm from the Squirrel Hill area, Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
So during that time, like the Monroeville Mall was, the place to be. You know,
Oh, absolutely. It was the metropolis of consumerism. That's where you went. You want to
right?
buy something, go to the mall. Come on.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what makes, Dawn of the Dead such a impactful and cult classic horror film.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And it's a beautiful, in its time and even currently, if you can appreciate it, it is a wonderful allegory to the consumerism that is us in essence. And zombies return because that's in some sort of primitive sense they have a memory of what they have always done, which is come to the mall and uh, and buy the stuff that I mentioned. And I think that's the glory of Dawn of the Dead. On one level, for others, it's probably just a hell of a lot of fun. It's a great horror film. Um, as were the comics of their day, the ECs, they brought a kind of horrific joy to people.
Absolutely, and that's part of what made me fall in love with horror movies. And
Of course.
as we talked at the con, and I just love to state it again that George Romero was probably like you know my all-time favorite horror director, writer director. And it's so awesome that I have his desk like we talked about. And I'm trying to become an aspiring screenwriter writing stuff on George's desk.
Well, across that desk, upon that desk, came many a great treatment and story idea and character sketches. I watched him and sometimes tried to help contribute to his thoughts. But yeah, when he resided there on Fort Pitt Boulevard, a lot of greatness was created upon that desk. Not to mention portions of it. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but once upon a time, after we had developed a relationship with Stephen King, he was somewhere on the Ohio Turnpike coming in through Pennsylvania, heading back to Maine after making one of his many, many visits in the Midwest somewhere on a speaking engagement. But he called from the road, and I happened to be at the office, and he said, Mike, I got to stop, even just for an hour. I've got a thought. I want to create something on paper. And I said, sure, Steve, come on by. So sure enough, in comes Stephen King. He ran upstairs, and upon that very desk, what portions I don't know, but I know he was working on it at the time. And he must have just pieced together some ideas that occurred to him on the road. Spent about an hour there, madly typing away, and then hit the road again. So what a
That
desk. You're right.
that
What a
is
desk. And
awesome.
isn't that a great story? You've
That
got to
is
get
a
him to
great
autograph that,
story.
that desk someday. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God, that adds like a whole nother like level to like the aura like I'm feeling through the desk when I write. It's like I mean that's kind of like a Stephen King story in itself is what
Oh, absolutely,
that's what
absolutely.
Greg Nicotero said to me when I told him that it wasn't at the Living Dead weekend because unfortunately I missed him, but it was
Hmm.
at an event last year called the Ellie Awards, which is actually where I got to meet George literally right before he passed, and
Yes.
it was a honoring experience, and um, I didn't tell him about the desk only because I didn't want to upset him or something if that's the way it
Oh,
was
you mean
gonna
George?
go. Yeah.
Oh no, he wouldn't have been upset at all. He would have been so pleased for you. I know it. I know it. Um, but nonetheless, I mean, in respect, I know why you didn't do it. But I mean, honestly, um, he was such a charming guy that I think he would have found that joy that a young writer would be using his desk to create new material. Inspired by him, he would have loved it. He would have loved it.
And that's really makes me happy because he really like was just again such an inspiration, along with Stephen King and the great ones of the 80s and 90s. I mean, Wes Craven, John Carpenter, Clive Barker, Stuart Gordon, like all those guys were
Well, they
just
all they all had, and some, God bless them, that are still alive, still have that joy in their creations. And with that joy comes a kind of just perfect satisfaction, and they're willing to share with others and join others in the process, in their thoughts, in what they've created. And I think that's why they're successful. Honestly, they don't want to make it esoteric. They want to really join you in what they're doing. George was famous for engaging people like the Federal Express guy who was delivering packages. Sit down for me. He'd say, man, sit down for me. I want to just, can I share something with you? And he would go into story details about something he was thinking about. And he was just that charming and that pleased with what he was doing. Amazing guy. I miss him dearly. But he's still with us. He'll never leave us. In truth, his material will always be with us.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great segue to talk about the projects you work with George. Um, I think we could just start with Martin and kind of work our way up
Sure,
the list,
sure.
but Martin is just such a cult classic, vampire film. And it's not even so much like a vampire film. It's something you could say is like could be a vampire film, but it's like something unique that's in between. And I had the pleasure of seeing John Amplis on Point Park's campus pretty often during my time studying there, and I'm actually going to try and get him on the show here pretty soon. Uh, but
Excellent, excellent.
I also heard he told me at Living Dead weekend that he was retiring from Point Park. I think
That's true.
at the end of this year, which will be
That's right.
a great loss for Point Park, but you know I understand why.
Well, I hear tell though as he said to me, that he might be able then to focus a little more on his acting career outside of Point Park. I mean, much of what he's doing there is instructional, professorial of sorts, and I think he'd like to be a little more active as an actor. And he's so damn talented. I could see that he has yet maybe another 20 to 30 years
Right.
to go as a screen actor, maybe stage actor, but he's so good on the screen. I mean, you speak of somebody that, and I've often said this, that he has a certain kind of magic before the camera, and that while I was shooting John as a director of photography on set, I found this amazing ability to just float along with the camera. It was almost like the two of them, meaning John and the camera, had some sort of affinity. And what I had to do was almost effortless. I didn't have to struggle to keep opposition or follow John. It was a certain kind of magic, and he has that kind of talent. He's so damn captivating that I wish nothing but more success in his retirement. But getting back to what you
Absolutely.
said, working with George, yeah, Martin was our first opportunity to get totally creatively involved with each other. I obviously had done other projects prior to that one, where more of a technical level. When I first joined with George, I did some cutting and some sound work on a film that he had made called Jack's Wife, which was later released as Seasons of the Witch. Um, and the Crazies, but yeah, Martin was a wonderful focus for a small group of people, meaning myself and Tony Buba and Tom Dubinsky and George and Christine Romero. Um, to make a nice, tight, esoteric little film that was just a joy to make. And my first opportunity as a DP.
That's awesome. Now, now, there's so many cool things about Martin. I mean, we could talk about that movie for a while. But I do want to I have like a long a long list of stuff to talk about. Um,
Sure,
so I kind of want to focus on more of like, I guess, like the Ramiro movies that I guess I'm more partial to as my favorites.
sure.
Um, and one of them is Night Riders. Uh,
Mm.
this movie was just like so cool to me when I watched it for the first time because my dad kind of like introduced me to like Mad Max when I was like a very young age. So that the vehicles, motorcycles, and muscle cars were always like like in my head, and it's like I've loved like American muscle and motorcycles and stuff since I was a kid because of that. And the concept with Night Riders was just really like a cool idea to me.
And interestingly enough, they were kind of parallel to each other, meaning Night Riders and Mad Max in the same time period. They both
Right.
released relatively at the same time. Of course, Mad Max had a much, much better release in terms of numbers of theaters. I remember George at one point saying, "Say, man, this film looks," meaning Mad Max, really looks super. And he said, "I'm a little worried about what I've done." I said, "George, you've done something magnificent. You have no worries." I said they're each in their own way gems, and they were. And for their time, they were extraordinary, both of them. Unfortunately, George's did not again get the kind of distribution and didn't have enough theaters to really get exhibited. But I think it stands as a great piece of work in his body of work, and I think it will be, as it already is currently being discovered, rediscovered.
That's a Ramiro I really like to show to my friends, like, because it's again like it's one you say doesn't get played, like the other ones do, and I've always been like a huge Ed Harris fan,
Mm.
and seeing him starting off with Ramiro, was really awesome to me because they I mean it's a classic fact that major actors usually get their starts in horror movies, and the fact that Ed didn't stray away from horror movies. He's done like a multitude of different things, but he came back to Stephen King in the '90s with Needful Things, and
Needful things, right?
had that part in The Stand, and he really he's just one of my all-time favorite actors. I would love to interview him and just pick his brain on multiple films that he's worked on. But I was actually wondering like what was it like working with Ed at like that young of an age.
Well, he certainly was never pretentious. I mean, even at that point, I mean, he had status as an actor, as a New York actor. Certainly hadn't developed, an inventory of films yet, but he nonetheless was an extraordinary actor to work with, and um, even then, you knew he was probably destined for greatness. He could command, just like Amplis can, attention in front of the camera, and always very well prepared. Interacted well with his fellow actors, and he just had a certain kind of quality that you can spot, and you can say, yeah, this this is probably the benchmark in terms of an individual who has abilities and is a great performer. And it was a pleasure working with him. But again, totally unpretentious, very very cooperative. Actors quite often that are in a starring role, so-called, in a film, have people stand in for them in terms of, as we set lighting, as we develop focus cues on set and so forth. But Ed is one of those kinds of actors who wants to be there and doing it and contributing and being part of the total process. And so he never had a stand-in. He insisted upon being there himself. When we turned to action, though, he became that character. He was so damn method about his acting that he absorbed the role. And oftentimes, George would call cut, but Ed was still dead on, spot on, and continuing on with his character. It was fun to watch. It was a joy. But we had so many great actors on that set. I mean, people who had been in previous Romero films came back to do, I thought, extraordinary pieces of acting. Ken Foray,
Right.
Amplis himself came back as a mime. I mean, on and on and on. It was a great film, great cast, and Ed was certainly at the top of that list.
That's awesome. That really makes me happy to hear because he seems like not only like professional but just like a really genuine person, you know.
I I remember on set, just a quick story, and this only happened. Excuse me for clearing my throat. This only happened one other occasion with, in my experience, with George, and that was with Vivica Linfors. That George said to me that they were going to come on set, they were to begin performing. He didn't want to disrupt them in any sense. He said, just keep rolling, keep loading magazines, and we will film until they have concluded. And we did that. And there's a scene where Ed Harris, if you remember, came back to the troupe after understanding that there had been turmoil and some thoughts about selling out to the promoter and so forth. And he makes that long approach on the motorcycle and addresses the troupe and then takes off again. That was all pretty much directed by Ed Harris, in essence. That was his moment. And we were ready to film. And that was his scene, in essence, in total. And the duration was what it was. Likewise with Vivica Linford in Creepshow, in the graveyard scene when she's talking to Father at the gravesite. That was hers. It was totally hers. So it's kind of a rarity, where you are just there to witness the performance. Nothing is really contrived or constructed. It is the actor, and in this case, those two actors, Vivica and Ed.
That's awesome. Like I like anytime you have like a small little story like that pertains to any
I
question that
got a
I'm
million of them,
asking.
Sam. I got a million of them.
Feel free to put in your two
I will.
bits
I'll
because
call you. We'll make this a weekly occurrence. How's that?
that
When
would
a
be
story
awesome.
occurs to me, I'll call. I'll call Sam. Sam, I thought of
That would be awesome. I have your
something.
number.
All
You
right,
have
man.
mine. Let's do
Cool. Cool.
it. But
That's kind of
on
the glorious thing about podcasts. I got to say, podcasters, I think, are a wonderful new form of just freedom. Journalistic freedom that you can create so much material at relatively little cost, and it sits there and waits for the world to review it. It's lovely, lovely thing.
exactly, and one of my all-time heroes of radio was Howard Stern. Only because
Oh yeah.
my dad, played him on the radio for me in the '90s when,
No
to be
kidding. Oh
perfectly
my goodness.
honest, I was way too young to be listening to.
Even appreciate what was going
but but
on.
I
Yeah,
but I appreciated it, and it kind of like set an impression in me of like, radio is awesome. Like
it is. Oh, it's
and
my favorite. It's my favorite.
it's so much fun, and like the DJs, and radio personalities are kind of like their own celebrities in a sense. And the fact that like podcasts have spawned from radio in a sense and has just taken it to the next level where, like you said, anybody can do it, and the content is there, and it's just waiting for listeners and new listeners to check it out and learn stuff.
Yeah, and it's almost. I have yet to stump podcasts with a topic or an area of interest. You can find it out there, which is glorious.
Right.
It's not impossible. It's like a radio with an endless tuning dial. You can you just keep going, and there's more, and you can find this, you can find that. Hey, your dad's
Exactly.
a pretty cool guy. I got to tell you, is your dad still alive?
Yeah. He's still
Wow,
alive.
he's a cool guy. He introduced
He's
you to a lot of great material.
to be perfectly honest, he is the main inspiration for like everything I've done. All my interests are because of him. Like my movie knowledge has only like expanded past his because like he introduced me to all the essentials growing up, music, classic rock. I mean, we listened to Tommy in the car like, when I was in kindergarten. So
Neat,
like the
neat.
the Who became one of my favorite bands, and
All right, when you next see Dad, I want you to ask him to give you his critique about Long John Neville.
okay,
Long John Neville. Okay, out of New York. Another great voice out of New York City.
okay,
Likewise, radio. Yeah.
he's from New York, so
Oh, then he'll know about Long John Neville.
yeah, I'm
I
gonna
mean,
ask him about. I'm gonna
what a
call him.
talent! What an amazing guy. Long John Neville had like a midnight show, like the first through the night, and long before anything America Overnight or whatever. This was the show, Long John Neville show.
Okay, I will definitely.
Sci-fi, talked about every imaginable topic.
I will definitely ask him about that. I mean,
All
he
right.
he he showed me like, one of the essentials that, we grew up watching, on Nick at Night was like the Twilight Zone,
Yeah.
and that like
Yeah. Of course.
Rod
Of course.
Rod Serling became like, one of my all-time inspirations, and my screenwriting teacher, Steve Cuden from Point Park, told us in our classes that if you want to study master storytelling, watch The Twilight Zone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And another great source. Sometimes the production values fall apart, but House of Hammer films out of England.
Yeah,
There's some great ones, some great stories, some great directing. Oftentimes the British take some of this horror stuff like too tongue in cheek, but of the collection, there's some great ones. Curse of Frankenstein and Rise of Dracula. Some really good ones. There's a zombie one I don't know if you're aware of called The Plague of the Zombies, which preceded George's Night of the Living Dead, which is not bad. It's directed by a gentleman, John Gilling, who did some other things for House of Hammer. But another great source in terms of looking at script ideas and so forth.
right, right. For me though, like the thing I think I liked most about the Twilight Zone, which is probably why George is a huge inspiration, was the anthology stuff. And
Mm.
like I have to say that, Creepshow 2, which, George wrote the screenplay, and you obviously directed, but also Tales from the Dark Side, the show and the movie, um, are just some of my all-time, all-time like favorite horror TV shows and movies.
Understandable. Understandable. And all inspired by EC, which I don't know how much you've delved into the EC comics, but they were all inspired by EC pretty much.
That's awesome. That's also why I like Tales from the Crypt. You know,
Oh yeah.
like it was kind of like the other spin-off of like Creepshow. Um,
Hmm.
and just there was just something unique to me about an anthology like TV series and movies, but like not so much like American Horror Story. Like I understand that's like an anthology series, but like each season follows a storyline, and then they just
Exactly.
do
Exactly.
it over, a new one. And the stuff I'm more talking about that's like anthology to me is Twilight Zone, um, the X Files standalone episodes, um, Tales from the Crypt, Tales from the Dark Side, The Outer Limits, like all that. That's
It's a very difficult task. I mean, you're talking about in terms of actual program time that it's some 20 minutes only that you have in most cases to deliver a story idea and do that incredible weave of characters, through an event. And it's a chore. I think there's a little more freedom in a full length motion picture with a simple theme, or a TV series that consumes like one express slot through a course of a season. This is tough work. It's tough work, and oftentimes it cannot be one particular writing artist doing this. And to find a collection of stories to develop an anthology um, is not easy. And I think you've pointed to some successes. I think Creepshow number one was indeed that, and Tales from the Dark Side proved to be that over 4 seasons, and then followed up by our Monsters stories that went 2.5 to 3 seasons. Um, it was grueling. It was grueling, and it's the importance of identifying and capturing and then creating this 20-minute worth of material is the test. Can it be done?
right. I mean, it's definitely. Oh, you're right. It is more difficult. Um, I mean, personally, for me, as a writer, I guess I'm unique in that way because I prefer to write like shorts like that than features. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just find it. I mean, yes, you have more freedom in a feature length script, but to me it's like you also have to do a lot more character development, a lot more planning out. You can do you can finish a short you know um, pretty easily, and at least for me, and you can also do the rewrites with it pretty easily because it's so short and self-contained. um, and I just, some people find it more difficult, I guess, tomato tomato kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
that's just what I really love to write is, the anthology genre. Um, but I also wanted to dive into your Stephen King stuff. I know Creepshow is kind of it could be is Stephen King, but I wanted to, I guess, also talk about uh, the golden years.
Mm. Okay, thank you.
Um, I I I rented this from Blockbuster on VHS. Uh,
Oh, get out of here.
yeah. And
When it was still Blockbuster. That's
when it was
right.
still
That's right.
Blockbuster, and the Blockbuster that I went to had a huge Stephen King section, and
You're right. Yeah, most of them did. You're right. They had a
yeah,
little section. Yeah.
and like
And Golden Years was one of those releases that they had on the Rex.
yeah, and I had no idea like at the time really who David Bowie was, and I didn't really discover Bowie
you
until like my high school years, and it was actually
you should have asked Dad. Your dad
yeah,
could have
yeah,
explained. Oh
Uh,
well.
well, actually, once like I saw that mini series and I told him the quote, he was actually like, "That's late, David Bowie. You want like the early stuff, you know." And then he gave me a whole list of
you
like Ziggy
of the
Stardust,
pure David Bowie.
yep,
Yeah.
pure David Bowie, and now Bowie has become like one of my all-time favorite artists and
Yeah.
cult actors for that matter. Um,
Absolutely.
I loved anything that he was in. He brought like such, there. I have like a whole list of like musicians also that I'm like fans of their like cult acting career, like Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop has a
Hmm.
great cult acting career. Um, Tom Waits is another. Uh,
Tom Waits. Yes, exactly.
Great cult acting career. Um, and Debbie Harry, Tales from the Dark Side.
Sam, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess I
That's
cut
okay.
out.
That's okay.
Uh, uh, did you hear the Debbie Harry part or?
I did. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, okay.
Thank
I
you.
wasn't sure if you were gonna follow up or not.
Oh
um,
no, no, no.
but yeah, so I have a huge, to show where my music mind is. I also love seeing these actors, do their thing on the screen as well as make some phenomenal music. Um, but back to the
Yeah. Well, do you
golden.
remember? You remember Meatloaf
That's another
in
one.
Where's the Rest of Me?
Yep, that's another
Yeah.
one. Yep,
Great
I love
performer. Yeah.
Meatloaf's acting career and his music. Yeah. Um, but let's get back to the golden years. Um, this was a very interesting Stephen King miniseries to me because it was like the sci-fi route, and I, up until that point, I had mainly been used to the horror Stephen King, and I've seen, I saw the Shawshank Redemption, so I knew his drama side, but I had no idea at the time that Stephen King also wrote sci-fi, and I later found out that The Running Man was Stephen King, and the movie is a great Schwarzenegger movie, but I know that it's entirely different from the book.
Steve has also often been quoted as saying that Golden Years was his novel for television, one of the first, and that he sat on the idea, which is true for many years. It just sat in his notebook, um, and he had outlines for 5 episodes, and then the last two. Um, but it's something that was near and dear to him that he had for a long time had hoped he could produce or have put into a television situation. And we found an opportunity in that it was really a summer replacement series on CBS, and so we got the chore to do that and brought it all to fruition.
That's
Talk about
awesome.
another great cast, though. Felicity Huffman and Francis Sternhagen and Keith Darabaka. I mean, Ed Lauder. I mean, lovely cast, great cast.
Absolutely. And I again
And
just
Steve King,
and
and
Steve
Steve
King.
King is the bus driver.
Right, right. I always love Stephen King's cameos. I think though my top favorite Stephen King cameo is in Maximum Overdrive.
Oh yeah,
That is my all-time favorite. I mean, when the machine, it opens, the movie opens, and he's putting the
hmm
card into the ATM, and the aliens start taking over the machinery, and it starts saying, like fuck you asshole or something, and Steve King just in the funny way that he says it, honey, this machine called me an asshole. And then I love how it goes, like ACDC scored the for that movie. It was just, that's just, I think not enough people know and can appreciate Maximum Overdrive. Um,
I agree. I
there's
agree.
there's just so many like fun, like I like to say to people that like I got my sense of humor from Stephen King, and if they can understand that comment, um, I know that I can click with that person. Um, but let's talk about some other Stephen King stuff that you've worked on, like one of the great ones, The Stand.
Oh yeah. Well, at that point in time, when I began my work with the stand, I had moved on, seemingly moved on in my career as kind of a producer, and so that pretty much stayed at home. I wasn't on set a lot, but was more or less behind the scenes. I had a lot of control in terms of devising a budget, for the shooting the motion picture. Spent a lot of time trying to give every advantage to the production in terms of budgetary monies, and so we talked about and successfully shot in Super 16, which gave us a little more monies to spend on a variety of things. The acting talent and locations. Um, Also directly involved in some of the optical effects, and had a nice situation. Could sit back and relax in New York, in essence, and kind of filter everything through the post production process. So it was a new experience. I wasn't directly involved on set, but
Right.
still creatively involved.
Would you say you like producing more than directing, or is it like an equal?
Hmm. Hard to say. As you go through a career progression, you keep looking for like what's my next advantage. Where can I next best uh, uh, create expression for myself. And when you go through those stages, directing is high, but you realize that as you climb the ladder, even beyond producer, like I think the executive producer really sets the tone ultimately, and you can probably do most in terms of creating and putting material onto the screen or onto the stage if you are that top flight executive producer. You bring the monies together, you bring the talent together, and you watch it happen, and you provide the necessary controls. And so, hard to say what you like best. I think directing is the most satisfying on set, but damn, if you can piece together a project from the very top, meaning the monies, the talent, and the actual locations, that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I can definitely agree with you on that. My friends ask me, when like I'm like talking about my own work, and I've gone to conventions, and some of the guests, like when I was at Living Dead Weekend, I was talking with Eugene Clark, who I did an interview with last year, and he remembered me, and I was telling him about some of the projects that I'm working on, and he asked me, would I ever want to direct? And I thought about it, and I probably could, learn to direct, but like you said, I think the real fun is with executive producing, and like you said, putting the people that would fit the roles best, and like I'd rather leave it up to a person who loves to direct and pick that director to direct a
Hmm.
project.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
like
I
just
think ultimately the power is on either end. I think it's the old adage, which is if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. And I think the writer obviously is the most critical factor. He's got to bring to light an idea and put it into some form that a variety of people, including the executive producer, will believe in, and in the case of the executive producer, would actually continue on with, as I mentioned, the funding and the acting and the locations. But he's critical on the front end, and on the back end is this executive producer that takes it in hand and carries forward. So those are probably the two most important functions: the writer and the executive producer.
and that's exactly what I would want to be. Awesome.
Exactly. No, I understand. Yeah, I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Um uh
But it's where you find yourself in this business or any creative business. It's where you're most comfortable. And I was always kind of psychotic. I loved it all, and I grew up fortunately early in my career with a guy like Romero, who had a small esoteric shop, and he did everything, and we just had fun, and it all seemed pretty glorious. And so, what am I doing today? It's whatever's needed. Whatever's needed.
that's awesome. That's so cool to hear. Um I did have two more Stephen King movies that I wanted to ask you about. Um
Okay, okay. We'll do
and
two more, and then we'll do a pickup on a future podcast. We're gonna do this on a weekly basis. Okay?
sounds great.
How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right.
Um the first one is the Langoliers. Um
Oh yeah.
Now this is probably like my favorite like Stephen King miniseries. Um, I really like it. I really like The Golden Years. I really like The Stand. But there is something really just in the concept of the Langoliers was just really, really interesting to me. And again, it's a sci-fi Stephen King, but there's also that horror element to it as well. And and that that is a Stephen King movie that I think could deserves, like, they're doing the whole second wave of Stephen King movies now, and I saw one that I thought was really deserved to be remade, was the Tommyknockers, but and I know
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's in
Oh yeah.
effect, but the Langoliers is one that I also think really deserves to get a reboot, but the original is
I agree. I agree with you because I tell you what it suffered from. Although I thought Tom Holland as a director did a magnificent job, and again, there's some wonderful performances inside of that series. Um, but at that point in time, we're talking about being on the cusp of the digital age.
right.
And while at the time, we're talking about 1994, 95, we had things, like random access editing and so forth, which accelerated the process. But certainly the final clue or the final missing element, which was just storage in terms of gigabytes, was not there yet. And the ability to cook incredible optical effects was very, very limited. And that's much of what we suffered from at that point in time. I thought we did a pretty magnificent job given the budget at that point in time. But we were probably 5 years too early. And, had it been made in the 2000s, it would have been a different film. It would have had a different flavor to it in terms of the amount of effects that are part and parcel of that script. But nonetheless, I think it's still very successful. I think Tom again did a wonderful job. It's captivating, and actually had pretty good ratings for its time. And still to this day, as people look at it and rate it, it's 8 out of 10, in terms of people's rating of a mini series of that sort. But that's where it suffered. It was just on the edge of that digital age, and it didn't have the kind of budget where we could go back into a studio and create a lot of physical effects that would have advanced things. I remember things like struggling so much of the CGI planes um, were probably hours upon hours just to cook or create on the computer. Whereas today, many of those shots can be done probably in 20 minutes.
Right. I definitely agree. Like the story doesn't lack at all.
Not
It's
at all.
it's
No,
it's all there, and I think that's what allow and for the time it's like you also again like you said it was the early mid 90s and computer effects were still you know on the rise. Movies
exactly.
movies still, were doing risque stuff with it. I mean, it's not what it is today or in the 2000s. Um, and there was that major jump from like, the late 90s into the 2000s where things just started to skyrocket in terms of pushing the boundaries and the effects with what you can do with CG. But it wasn't really. People have to remember that Jurassic Park, which came out in 1993, um, was the first film to change the game on how CG effects were used and what you could do with it. Um, but even that took like hours upon hours to nail
Oh, absolutely.
the perfection of
Yeah.
it to make it be a timeless
Yeah.
film to have it still stand up today. Those dinosaurs still look real, with the
Oh, yeah.
CG and the combination of the late great Stan Winston doing the
Hmm.
practical effects. And
But even at that, and they probably spent the better part of a year and a half just in post production and just creating some of those,
right,
those effects. But even at that, if you look at it by today's standards, the kind of lighting maps that they put onto the dinosaurs and so forth are good, but not as great as today. It's just one of those issues that, what can you say? We made leaps, as you say. We made an incredible leap from the 90s to the turn of the century, into, again, it gets back to storage and speed of processing. I had the I have the glorious history of moving from the tactile sense of handling motion pictures, cutting motion pictures physically into the digital age. I remember the first time I worked on a CMX laser disc editing system in New York City. Um, it was amazing the speed at which you could then, and that was on Tales from the Darkside, the series, the speed at which you could cut. Moving on then from the laser discs to the Avid systems where it was purely digital. Um, craving to get 10 gigabytes. Where we can only have 10 gigabytes to cut with. Oh, but damn it, we can't. And you'd be borrowing gigs from across town in Manhattan just to finish a cut and add music. Um, and then watch it develop into what we have in today's world, where you can cut at home. You can cut on your own PC if you want.
right,
It's incredible
right.
what I've witnessed. What I've witnessed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and I also like to think that the fact that we're having like a second wave of Stephen King, the fact that the
Mm-hmm.
80s and the 90s gave the first wave, which basically allowed filmmakers of that time, writers and filmmakers of that time, to take their interpretation of King's work and allow that influence to be impacted on, the kids of that era, who are now my age and a little bit older, and are going on to
Produce their
produce
own.
their own
Yeah,
stuff and make,
yeah.
reinterpret his work. And sometimes, in certain cases, they're able to do better character development, better effects, better storytelling because of what's just allowed in that realm of what you're allowed to put onto the page and show on screen versus what you could do in the 80s and 90s where you were limited with effects and things like that. And just I mean,
And it wasn't just purely the mechanical aspect of it either. I mean, there are also just societal restrictions too. When you think about, when did we abandon like this movie code business? Where you were restricted as a filmmaker by the damn rating, which George went through on Dawn of the Dead. Um, that was late in coming, and finally, late in the '90s, we were kind of purged of that ridiculous rating system, and what is it X, and what is it R, and it's kind of we went to a more simplistic way of, okay, it's a PG, it's called parental guidance. If you want to take your kid, good. If you don't, then you should speak to the kid, and you can't go. Put it back on the individual. The same kind of purge that the early EC Comics went through. Do we need some sort of like regulation? Can we be individuals about this? Can we look at material and make our own decisions? And are we that frightened of our children that they're going to see something that's going to turn them into demented fools? Are we that fragile that we watch something and it will be totally altered? Let's think about this. So I think, yes, it was a technological revolution and also a little more freedom as a society. We could look at material and at some point it so totally exploded. The distribution and the control by a select few of distributors is over. We have Netflix, we have Prime Video. It's impossible to stop now. There's enough material, enough vehicles out there for material that forget the ratings. It's free expression. It's like the podcasts. You keep turning it down, you find more stuff,
exactly, exactly. And
and that's glorious.
it is
That's the
glorious.
ultimate in literary freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I love the fact that, like, I live, in a day and age where, yes, I'm an aspiring writer, but I'm writing in the longest running um, genre to have a continuous fan base at the box office, which is horror.
Mm-hmm.
Horror is
Mm-hmm.
the longest running genre to have a continuous success at the box office, where westerns were famous for a period of time, and then there was film noir, and then there was neo noir, and action, and drama, and comedy. Horror is the only genre to, all those other genres have had their ups and downs, hits or miss. And there's just been a continuous fan base for horror movies since the Universal films. Um, that's just kept people entertained because I think as a society, it's like we like to be scared. We like to see the dark side. And see what the Ramiro here, what our dark halves are capable of.
Right. But it's all just kind of a glorious exercise, a psychological exercise you're going through. It's an escape. It's a release, and it's a vicarious way to work out our own fears. Fears that are imposed upon us. It's a way of working things out. It's no worse than our dream state where we unload, we release, and get rid of all those things that somehow have become twisted in our minds. Now we watch before us a storyline that lets us laugh, cry, get frightened, jump, but we're playing it through. We're playing it through, and that's very healthy, I think.
I think so too. And if like I'm having a bad day or someone makes me angry, and I'm like, that it's that person, that person. I just, instead of, getting angry about it or stressing over it, I'm like, well, you know what? I just have a new character idea, and that person's going to get knocked off pretty bad. But
Yeah,
it's the freedom
yeah,
that you can do that instead of saying that it's like, that's what you are going to do, because that that
I agree.
that
I agree.
that's
Yeah,
immoral and wrong. But to write it on paper for fantasy, and to see it come to fruition in sometimes a very satirical way, it can be very enjoyable for the viewers. And I think that's what part of going to see horror movies, and the beauty of slasher movies, and um, just the horror genre in general.
yeah, without a doubt. And it's not just horror films. I think motion pictures in general, um, novels, you know,
Right, right.
written material give you a sense of the ability to escape the now and just unravel, just unravel it for yourself. Put
Absolutely.
it on the stage and work it out.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I think we're
Okay.
about at time here. Um,
Well, good. What do you typically do? Would you do a 1 hour show or?
yeah, I like to have it stretched between, like, 45 minutes to an hour. Um,
Okay.
that's kind of like where,
So
like,
I probably cheated you the last time we met. I think when we met last year at the mall on the previous convention, I didn't give you an hour for goodness sakes.
no, no, that was a different
So I owe
circumstance.
you.
Right,
I owe you.
yeah. Absolutely. Well, Michael,
Well, we'll do it. We'll do it again. I have so much more to tell you. So much more to tell you.
absolutely.
So many more stories to share.
Absolutely. I would love to have you on the show anytime. It is just an
Great. Thank you
absolute
so much.
pleasure. Thank you just so much for swimming in the bowl with me.
Likewise, Sam. Thank you for having me in the bowl.
Absolutely.
I leave you. I leave you with something that is kind of a crusade of mine, which is about censorship and imposing one's morality and thoughts on other individuals in terms of how they view material, what they read, what they watch. And this is from a 40s Chicago Daily News article that was talking at that point in time about comic books in general and the corruption that they provide. And they categorize them as badly drawn, badly written, and badly printed. Their hypodermic injection of sex and murder make the child impatient with better, though quieter stories. And that was a weird perspective. And I think even today we run that danger in terms of video games, uh, trying to find causal relations between what entertains us and what causes troubled individuals to create harm. And it has nothing to do with what we discussed. In fact, I think what motion pictures and what the written word can offer is really a kind of beautiful escape and a just kind of vicarious unraveling of our troubles.
I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Sam.
I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give my best to your dad.
I definitely will. I'm gonna. What was the person again?
Long John Neville,
Long John
like
Neville.
Neville Island.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Got it.
He'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much,
All right,
Michael.
buddy.
All right.
All right, Sam. We'll meet again. Bye bye.
Absolutely. Bye.